I was wrong about a lot of things that summer, but the thing I was most wrong about was thinking my mother would come back when she said she would. She said 3 weeks. She stayed gone for 38 days. I counted every single one of them on the back of a CVS receipt I kept folded in my pocket like a prayer card. My name doesn't matter much for this story, but I'll tell you anyway because that's how my grandmother taught me. You give people your name before you ask them to listen. I'm Marigold. Everyone called me Goldie until I turned about 13. And then I asked them to stop because it sounded like a dog's name and I was tired of being something cute. That summer, I was 17 years old, 2 months out from my high school graduation, and I had a little brother named Beau who had just turned 10 in May. Beau had asthma, the kind that doesn't kill you but reminds you it could. And he was scared of moths for reasons I never fully understood. He was a sweet kid. He still is. We lived in a rental duplex outside Asheville, North Carolina, on a street called Honeysuckle Lane that smelled like nothing of the kind. The other half of the duplex was occupied by an old man named Mr. Risted Faraday, who I'm pretty sure was deaf in one ear and pretended to be deaf in the other, so he didn't have to talk to anybody. Our half was painted that pale, sickly green you only ever see on rentals, and the screen door slapped shut so hard it shook the whole front room. My mother worked 2 jobs back then, receptionist at a chiropractor's office during the day and weekend shifts at a casino over in Cherokee, dealing blackjack. She was good at the second one and bad at the first. She told us she didn't love either job, but she loved a man named Curtis who she'd met at the casino about 8 months before any of this happened. I never trusted Curtis. He had the kind of smile that looked rehearsed in a bathroom mirror, and he called me kiddo in a voice that made my skin go cold. He drove a black Dodge Charger with one of those bumper stickers that says Lively Uchi Love in a font that didn't match. I don't know why I remember that bumper sticker so clearly. I think because every time I saw it, my stomach did a little flip and I didn't know why. The morning my mother told us about Canada was the first Saturday in June. She was wearing a coral-colored sundress I'd never seen before, and her hair was twisted up into one of those messy buns that takes 45 minutes to look casual. She'd set out cereal for Beau, the off-brand kind, the kind that gets soggy if you so much as look at it, and she sat across from us at the kitchen table with her hands folded like she was about to deliver bad news at a corporate meeting. Marigold, she said, Curtis and I are going on a trip. I waited. Beau looked up from his cereal. To Canada, she said, up to a place called Banff. Curtis has friends with a cabin. We'll be gone 3 weeks. Maybe a little longer if the drive's nice on the way back. I said, when? She said, Monday. I said, Monday, like 2 days from now, Monday. She said, yes. I said, what about Beau? And she looked at me with this expression I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. Half relief, half guilt, all of it dressed up as confidence. And she said, Marigold, sweetheart, you're 17. You're practically an adult. You've got this. I said, Mom, I start my summer job at the bookstore in 2 weeks. I haven't even taken my driver's test. I don't have a checking account. I don't. She slid an envelope across the table. White, the kind you get in a stationery set from a Hallmark store. My name was written on it in her looping handwriting, and inside was 4 $20 bills and a 10, $90. She said, this is for groceries. You can use the food in the freezer. The rent's paid through July 15th. I already gave it to the landlord. Electric's on autopay. Just be smart. Don't have anyone over. Don't drive my car. The registration's expired anyway. I'll Venmo you more if you need it, but try to stretch it. $90 for 3 weeks, for 2 kids. I did the math in my head while she was still talking. That worked out to about $30 a week, which was about $4.20 something a day, which was about $1.40 per person per meal if we ate 3 times a day. I knew this because I'd been doing grocery math since I was 12, since the year my dad left, and my mother had to figure out how to feed us without him. I didn't say any of that. I just nodded. Beau said, Mom, when are you coming back? She said, before your camp starts, baby. I promise. His camp started July 20th. She left Monday morning at 6. Curtis honked from the driveway and didn't come in. She kissed Beau on the top of his head and squeezed my shoulder and said, "I love you, Marigold. I really do. You're going to be amazing." Then the screen door slapped shut behind her, and the charger pulled away, and the house went quiet in a way I'd never heard it before. I stood at the front window for a long time. Beau came up next to me holding his cereal bowl. He was still in his pajamas, the ones with little astronauts on them. He said, "She's coming back, right?" I said, "Yeah, buddy. She's coming back." I believed it then. I really did. The first week was almost okay. I'd been managing the house anyway for years. My mother was the kind of woman who would forget to buy toilet paper for a month, but always remembered to get her nails done, so I knew the rhythm of it. I made Beau eggs in the morning. I walked him to the community pool in the afternoon because he liked the swim instructor, a college kid named Marcus who let him try the high dive. I cooked pasta and frozen vegetables for dinner, and we watched reruns of game shows on the couch until he fell asleep. Day 8, my mother called me from a payphone outside a gas station in Saskatchewan and said the cabin was beautiful and that Curtis had surprised her with a little side trip up to a glacier. She said it would just be a few extra days, 5 at the most. She didn't ask about Beau. She asked if I'd remembered to water her ficus, and I said yes, even though I had not. Day 12, I went to make dinner and realized the pantry was almost empty. The freezer was down to a bag of generic chicken nuggets, half a tray of fish sticks, and a tub of ice cream that had been there since Easter and had crystals on the top. I counted the cash in the envelope. $43 left. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and tried not to cry. I'm not a crier. I never have been. My grandmother used to say I'd inherited my crying allowance from somebody else by accident, and I had to make do with the rest of my face. So I sat there and I didn't cry, but I made a noise that wasn't quite a noise, and Beau came in and asked if I was okay, and I told him I was just tired. I called my mother that night. Voicemail. I called her the next morning. Voicemail. I called her the next morning. Voicemail. I called her 4 more times that day. Voicemail. Voicemail. Mailbox full. I called my dad. He lived in Phoenix now with his second wife, a woman named Tamara who sold those leggings online. He answered on the 4th ring and I started talking before he could even say hello. I said Mom went to Canada and left us with $90 and I think she's not coming back when she said she would, and I don't know what to do. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "Marigold, honey, that's really not. Your mom and I, we have an arrangement. I can't just. Tamara and I are saving for a kitchen remodel and we already send the support payments. Can you call your aunt?" I hung up before I said something I'd regret. I called my aunt. She lived in Florida. She said she'd see what she could do and call me back. She did not call me back. I called my grandmother, my mom's mom, who lived in a retirement community in Greenville. She said, "Oh, sweetie, your mother is just being your mother. She'll be back. Have you tried the food bank at the Methodist church?" I had not. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I went into the bathroom and ran the shower so Beau wouldn't hear, and I sat on the floor and I did cry, finally, into a hand towel that smelled like laundry detergent. It was the kind of crying that doesn't sound like crying. It just makes you feel like your chest is being wrung out. When I came out, Beau was sitting on the couch with the cereal box in his lap. He said, "We're almost out of milk." I said, "I know, buddy." He said, "Are we gonna be okay?" And something in me, some little bone or wire or whatever it is that snaps in people right before they decide to do something difficult, it snapped. I said, "Yeah, we're gonna be okay." The next morning, I walked 3 miles to the bookstore where I was supposed to start working in a week. The owner was a woman named Ms. Hadley, somewhere in her 60s, who wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and had a parrot named Phineas that lived behind the counter. I asked her if I could start early. Like that day, she said the job didn't officially open until the 18th. I said, "Ma'am, I will sweep your floors, I will clean the bathroom, I will reorganize the whole back room if you let me start now and pay me what you can." She looked at me over the top of her glasses for a long time. Then she said, "Sit down, honey." I sat. Phineas screamed something that might have been a curse word in another language. She made me a cup of tea, the only person who has ever made me a cup of tea in a moment like that, and I love her for it until I die. And she asked me, gently, what was going on. I didn't tell her everything. I told her my mom was out of town and money was tight. She nodded like she'd heard this exact thing before from other girls and probably had. She said, I can give you $12 an hour off the books for the next 2 weeks, then we'll do it proper when the job starts. I can give you maybe 20 hours a week. Cash. That work? $12 an hour, 20 hours was $240 a week. $240 wasn't going to feed us and pay for everything else, but it was something. It was so much more than nothing that I almost cried again right there over the tea. I said, yes, Mom. Thank you, Mom. I worked the rest of that day and the next and the next. Beau sat in the kids section and read his way through the entire Magic Tree House series in 5 days. Ms. Hadley didn't charge him for the ones he wanted to keep. She slipped me an extra $40 at the end of the first week and told me she'd found it in the register, but I knew where it had come from. But $240 a week wasn't enough. I want to tell you about the moment the idea came to me, because it didn't come like a lightning bolt. It came like a slow, embarrassing dawn. I was walking home from the bookstore late one Friday, and I cut through the alley behind the strip mall where there was a Panera and a little Thai place and a wing joint called Cluck's. The dumpster behind Panera was wide open, and a guy in an apron was throwing in a black trash bag, and as it landed I could see, through the thin plastic, whole loaves of bread. Bagels. Like dozens of bagels. Still in their paper sleeves. I stopped. I said, excuse me, sir, is that food? Is that food you're throwing away? The guy looked at me like I was a raccoon that had learned to speak. He said, yeah, it's day-old. We toss it every night. Health code, I said. Could I have some of it? He said. Could I have some of it? He said, technically no. But if you happen to be standing here when I happen to walk inside, I wouldn't see anything. He walked inside. I fished 4 loaves of bread and a paper sleeve of bagels out of that dumpster. Clean, wrapped, untouched bread, and I walked home with them like I was carrying gold bars. That night, Beau and I had grilled cheese on sourdough that would have cost $6 a loaf, and ice water, and we felt like rich people. The next afternoon, I went to Cluck's and asked the manager what they did with the wings that didn't sell. He said they got composted. I asked if I could take some. He said no, liability, but he could give me a 50% off employee meal deal if I came by it close any night. I said I wasn't an employee. He said, you are tonight, kid. By the end of that week, I had a circuit. Panera on Wednesdays and Saturdays for bread. Cluck's on Thursdays. A little bakery called Sweet Mercy on Sundays that gave me whatever didn't sell, which was usually a whole tray of muffins, because nobody in our town apparently buys muffins on a Sunday. A pizza place called Tony's that would give me unsold slices at closing if I helped wipe down their tables for half an hour. And then I had an idea that scared me because it felt either brilliant or completely stupid. There was a young mom 3 doors down. Her name was Whitney. She was maybe 23. She had 2 little kids and a husband who was a long-haul trucker and gone most of the month. I'd seen her at the gas station once, buying a single can of soup with quarters from a coin purse. I knocked on her door one Saturday morning carrying a paper bag with 4 bagels and a loaf of Panera multigrain. I said, hi, I'm Marigold from the Green Duplex. I get a lot of free bread from the bakery on the corner, more than my brother and I can eat. Would you want any? She looked at me for a second like I was running a scam. Then her face just opened. She said, are you serious? I said, yes. She took the bread, and the next day she knocked on my door with a casserole, a real one. Tuna noodle with crushed potato chips on top. She said her grandmother's recipe. She said, please come over for dinner Tuesday because her kids loved Beau already from seeing him at the bus stop. That was when I understood the thing I needed to understand. I wasn't going to make money giving food away. I was going to make a community that took care of itself, and the community was going to take care of us back. I started talking to people. I introduced myself to a woman named Geraldine who lived in the apartment building across the street. She was 60-something on disability, lost her husband 2 winters back. I brought her muffins and she gave me a Tupperware of homemade chicken and dumplings. I met a single dad on the next block, A guy named Russell who had 3 kids and was working 2 jobs. I gave him bread and a tray of leftover wings, and the next weekend he came over with his toolbox and fixed the back porch step that had been wobbling for 2 years. In 4 weeks, I had what my grandmother used to call a circle. A loose, unspoken network of people who didn't have much and were quietly looking out for each other. I was the youngest one in it by about a decade. They started calling me the bread girl as a joke, and then it stopped being a joke and just became my name in that neighborhood for a while. Whitney watched Beau 3 afternoons a week so I could work more hours at the bookstore. Geraldine taught me how to make a rooks. Russell drove me to the DMV on his day off and helped me get my driver's license, the test I'd been putting off for a year. A woman named Tessa Lynn, who I met through Geraldine, ran a daycare out of her house and offered to let Beau go for free in the mornings if I needed it. And I said no. I needed to keep him close, but thank you. She put a pin in it and said, when school starts, the offer's still open for aftercare, and I won't take $1 from you, baby. You bring me a loaf of that good Panera bread and we'll call it square. I started keeping a little notebook, spiral bound, lined, the kind they sell for 99 cents at the drugstore. I wrote down everyone's name and what they could give and what they needed. Geraldine makes amazing soup, needs help with her trash bins on Wednesday nights. Russell, handyman, needs childcare on Friday evenings. Whitney, great with little kids, needs help getting groceries because her car doesn't run. It wasn't a charity, it was a map. And once I had a map, I could send food where it needed to go and ask favors when I needed them. And the whole thing started to hum like an engine. I want to be honest with you about the money, because I know that's the part that doesn't add up if you don't think about it carefully. The bookstore paid me $240 a week, cash. By the 3rd week of June, I was bringing in another 20 or 30 in tips because Miss Milet Hadley let me keep what people dropped in the Barrett's little tip cup. The food I got from dumpster runs and managers who took pity on me was probably worth another $60 or $70 a week in groceries we didn't have to buy. The circle covered the rest in barter. Whitney's casseroles, Geraldine's soups, Russell's repairs, Tessa Lynn's daycare offer for when school started. The rent was already paid through July. The electric was on autopay from my mother's checking account, which she'd left running. I checked the balance once at the ATM by entering her debit card with the PIN I'd known since I was 12. There was $86 in it. That was all. So I kept my own little envelope of cash in a coffee can on top of the fridge. And I kept it separate. And I didn't touch her account for anything except the electric bill that was going to draft on the 20th. I was not going to be in debt to that woman. Day 28, my mother called from Calgary. She said the trip was extending again because Curtis was negotiating some kind of business thing. She said she'd be home July 22nd. Beau's camp had started 2 days before. I said, Mom, do you know what date it is? She said, Honey, yes, I know, but I said, Beau started camp on Monday. You said you'd be back. She said, Marigold, I'm doing the best I can right now. Please don't make me feel guilty when I'm trying to enjoy myself for the first time in 20 years. That was the sentence that decided it for me. That she said the word guilty before I did. That she got there first. I said, okay, Mom, drive safe. I hung up and I did not cry. I made a sandwich. I went outside and pulled weeds in the strip of dirt by our walkway until my hands were shaking, and then I went inside and washed them. And then I called Whitney and asked if she wanted to come over for grilled cheese. She did, the night my mother came home. Day 38, July 24th. A Wednesday. I was sitting on the front porch with Beau in my lap. He'd had a long day at camp and fallen asleep against my shoulder. I was reading a paperback Miss Smith. Hadley had lent me some mystery novel set in Scotland that I wasn't really following because the names were all hard. The cicadas were screaming. The whole street smelled like somebody 2 houses down was grilling burgers. The Charger pulled into the driveway at 9:20. My mother got out first. She was tanner than I'd ever seen her, and she had a new haircut, shorter, with bangs that didn't suit her. She was wearing white linen pants. Curtis got out of the driver's side and immediately started pulling suitcases out of the trunk, like he lived there. She walked up to the porch. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. She looked at me and at Beau and at the porch, which was clean. She looked at the planters by the front door, which had marigolds in them. I planted them 3 weeks back because they were on sale at the hardware store and I thought it would be funny. She looked at me again. She said, Marigold. It looks really good. I said, yeah. She said, I'm sorry it took longer than I said. The drive back was, I said, Mom, please come inside and sit down. I want to show you something. She came in. Curtis tried to come in. I said, Curtis, would you mind giving us a minute as a family? I said it polite. I'd been practicing it for 2 weeks. He stood on the porch and looked offended, and after a few seconds, he went back to the car to smoke. I sat my mother down at the kitchen table. I put Beau on the couch in the next room with a pillow. I went to the fridge and took down the coffee can on top, the one with my cash in it. I took down the notebook. I took down the little chalkboard menu I'd started keeping by the stove that had this week's dinners written on it. Monday, Whitney's lasagna, her turn. Tuesday, Geraldine's soup. Wednesday, leftovers. Thursday, Russell brings barbecue. Friday, bread and salad from the garden Whitney and I planted in the side lot. I put it all on the table. The cash, the notebook, the chalkboard, my pay stubs from the bookstore, the ones Miss Hadley had started giving me when the official job began, the receipt from the DMV when I got my license, the little card Tessa Lynn had given me about her aftercare program. I said, Mom, this is what I built while you were gone. She picked up the notebook. She started turning the pages. She got to the page where I'd written, in red pen, the list of people who'd helped us. Names, what they'd done, what I owed them in return. 23 names. 23. She put the notebook down. Her hands were shaking. She said, Marigold, I don't. I said, Mom, I'm not mad. She looked up. I said, I was mad. I was so mad. I was so mad for so many days I thought it was going to eat through my chest. But I had to stop being mad because I had a brother to feed and a job to do and people who needed me, and there wasn't any room in my day for the kind of anger you deserve. She started crying then. Real crying. The ugly kind, with sounds. I said, I'm not going to be mad, but I'm also not going to forget. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen now, I told her. I told her I'd called a woman from legal aid the week before. A woman named Karina who'd come into the bookstore looking for a gift for her niece, and who I'd ended up talking to for 40 minutes after she asked why I looked so tired. I told her Karina had explained to me what abandonment of a minor meant in North Carolina, and what my rights were as a 17-year-old, and what could be done about custody of Beau. I told her I wasn't going to press charges. I wasn't going to call DSS. I was, in fact, going to forgive her. But forgiveness, the real kind, didn't mean trust. It meant I was going to put down the heavy thing I'd been carrying because I couldn't carry it and my own life at the same time. I told her the conditions. Curtis was not going to live in this house, ever. If she wanted to see him, she could see him somewhere else. I was going to keep working at the bookstore through senior year, which I'd been planning on doing anyway. The money I made was mine. She would not ask me for it, and she would not borrow from it. Beau was going to keep going to Tessa Lynn's aftercare when school started. My mother was going to pay Tessa Lynn directly. I had already worked out the price. It was $35 a week, and it was a steal. She was going to apologize to Beau, properly. Not, I'm sorry I was gone so long, baby. She was going to sit down with him and say what she did and why it was wrong and ask him what he needed from her now. And the last thing was something Geraldine had said to me one night when we were sitting on her stoop, drinking weak coffee out of mugs that didn't match. She'd said, Honey, your mama is not a bad woman. She's a scared woman who never learned how to be a mother because nobody ever modeled it for her. That don't excuse what she did. But if you want her in your life going forward, you have to teach her the way you teach a child. So the last thing I told my mother was that she was going to come with me once a month to a free parenting class that met at the Methodist church. I'd already signed her up. The first one was on the second Saturday in August. I said, Mom, you don't have to agree to any of this. You can go right back out that door with Curtis and we can sort it out in court. But if you want to be in this family, If you want to keep being our mother, this is what it looks like now. She sat there for a long time. The cicadas outside got louder. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at the moon. She said, "Marigold, when did you grow up?" I said, "On day 8, Mum. When you didn't answer the phone." She nodded. She cried some more, quietly. Then she said, "Okay." "Yes, okay." She went out to the porch and she told Curtis to go home. She didn't say where home was. He said some things I won't repeat. She came back inside and locked the door behind her, and she sat down on the floor in the living room next to Beau on the couch, and she watched him sleep for a long, long time. I went into the kitchen and I washed the dishes from dinner. I could hear her crying softly in the other room and I let her. There are some kinds of crying a person has to do alone, even when somebody else is in the next room. That was 2 summers ago. I'm at UNC Asheville now, studying social work. I commute from home because Beau is 12 now and I want to be close. My mother is still my mother, which means she is still flawed and sometimes flaky and sometimes wonderful, and we have a relationship I would describe as careful. I love her, and I know what she's capable of, and I try not to ask her for anything I can't afford to lose. She's been to every parenting class. She broke up with Curtis last September after she finally caught him in a lie too big to ignore. She got a better job, an actual administrative position at the hospital, and she comes home for dinner on Sundays. The circle is still going. There are 31 names in the notebook now. Whitney's husband came off the road and got a local job. Geraldine moved in with her sister last winter but still calls me every Tuesday. Russell remarried, a kindergarten teacher named Yvonne, who is no exaggeration, one of the loveliest human beings I have ever met. Tessa Lynn watches Beau on the afternoons I have late classes. Ms. Hadley made me assistant manager. The parrot has learned to say my name, sort of. It sounds more like Margot, but I'll take it. I want to tell you the thing I've learned, because I've been thinking about how to say it for a long time, and I think I finally have the words. Rock bottom is not a place. It's a moment. It's the half second between when you realize nobody is coming and when you decide what to do about it. You can spend that half second forever if you want to. A lot of people do. They build whole lives down there. But you can also choose to do the next thing. Just the next thing. Make a sandwich. Knock on a door. Ask for help. Offer help. Write a name in a notebook. That's all I did. I did the next thing over and over for 38 days, and then I kept doing it, and somewhere in there my life got built without me noticing. If you're sitting somewhere right now with an envelope of cash and a little brother and a mom who isn't answering the phone, and I know some of you are because I get the messages, I want you to know that the moment you're in is not the end of your story. It's the place your story starts being yours. Make the sandwich. Knock on the door. I'll see you in the next one. I think about that summer almost every day even now, and I've come to believe that nothing about it was an accident. My mother left because nobody had ever taught her how to stay. Her own mother had been distant and cold. Her own father had vanished when she was 9, and she'd been handed adulthood the way you hand a child a hot pan, without warning, without instruction, without anybody saying, "Watch out, this is going to burn you." She did the only thing she'd been shown how to do, which was run toward whoever made her feel chosen. That was Curtis, that summer. Before him it was someone else. Before him it was my father. There is a line, a long one, and I am the first person in it who decided not to keep walking the same way. But I didn't decide that out of wisdom. I decided it out of necessity. On the 8th day, when the voicemail box was full and the cereal was almost gone, I had a choice that wasn't really a choice. I could fall apart, or I could feed my brother. And so I fed my brother. And the next day I did it again. And somewhere around day 15, I noticed that the doing of the next small thing had become a kind of muscle, and the muscle was getting stronger, and I was becoming someone I hadn't known I could become. That's the part I want you to understand. Strength is not a personality trait. It is a habit. It is what happens when you choose the harder, more honest thing 100 times in a row until your hands learn the shape of it and stop asking why. I also want to say this because I think we get it wrong a lot. Forgiving my mother was not a soft thing. It was the hardest thing I did that summer. Harder than the dumpsters, harder than the bookstore, harder than the night I sat with Beau through an asthma attack at 3 in the morning and counted his breaths until the inhaler kicked in. Forgiveness wasn't excusing her. It wasn't trusting her. It was setting down a heavy stone I could not afford to keep carrying, because I had a life to build and the stone was using up both my hands. Geraldine was right. My mother wasn't a bad woman. She was an untaught one. And the day I understood that I could be her teacher instead of her victim was the day I stopped being 17 and started being whoever I am now. If you're listening to this and something has come undone in your life, a parent who left, a parent who promised and didn't, a season where the floor has dropped out, I want you to know that the smallest decent action you take today is not small. It is the beginning of the person you are about to become. Make the sandwich, knock on the door, write the name in the notebook. That's how a life gets built, one next thing at a time.